It had been months since my fiancée, Claire, had shown any real affection. The warmth we once shared, the playful intimacy, the small gestures that made our relationship feel alive, they had slowly vanished. I tried not to notice at first, dismissing it as stress or fatigue, but over time the absence of attention became impossible to ignore. Every rejected hug, every sidestep from closeness, every dismissive remark etched itself into my awareness. I am Nathan, and I've learned to read people carefully. I've built my life around observation, patience, and understanding the layers beneath what's said aloud. In relationships as in life, actions rarely lie. Words can deceive, but consistent behavior reveals truth. And Claire's behavior had been speaking loudly, even when her words tried to reassure me otherwise. Then, out of nowhere, one evening she sat across from me at the dinner table, her expression unusually soft, almost vulnerable. "Nathan, I think it's time we talk about starting a family," she said, her voice measured, deliberate. I froze momentarily, not out of surprise but out of awareness. This sudden request, after months of distance and rejection, carried a weight I could sense immediately. Something didn't align. Her timing, her tone, her carefully chosen words, they all hinted at a narrative she wanted me to accept without question. I didn't react impulsively. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, studying her, noting every micro-expression, every subtle inflection. In my experience, people who suddenly change course after prolonged avoidance often have reasons they hope remain hidden. Claire's request was more than a desire. It was a calculated test, a pivot in the story she had been silently writing. I sipped my drink slowly, letting the moment linger. My mind began to map out the possibilities, analyzing her recent behavior. The evenings she claimed to be busy, the unexplained trips, the subtle distractions. Everything was a piece of a larger puzzle. Her words about starting a family were not simply a romantic decision. They were a revelation waiting for the right observer to see through. And I was that observer. By the time she looked up, waiting for my response, I had already reconstructed the narrative she had assumed I wouldn't notice. I leaned forward, my expression calm, controlled, and I said nothing for a few moments, letting the tension settle and giving her the realization that actions, after all, speak louder than words. The next few days were filled with a tense normalcy. Claire acted as if nothing had shifted, carrying on with her routine while I observed quietly. Every glance at her phone, every fleeting hesitation in her speech, every casual excuse to step out, each told a story she assumed I wouldn't read. But I had learned long ago that patience reveals truths more effectively than confrontation. I replayed her sudden request for a baby in my mind, analyzing the context. After months of avoidance, why now? The timing, the tone, the carefully calculated vulnerability. It all pointed to a deeper motive, a narrative she hoped I wouldn't uncover. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, but to me it was glaringly obvious. Actions speak, words sometimes lie, and her actions were speaking volumes. That evening, she sat across from me at the table again, nervously stirring her tea. "Nathan, I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future," she said, her voice carefully measured. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I leaned back slightly, letting her words hang in the air. She wanted a reaction, a sign that I would accept her sudden proposal without question. But my calm, measured silence created a mirror for her to confront the reality she had been hiding. I finally spoke, my tone quiet but deliberate. "Claire, your words are clear, but your actions over the past months tell a different story." I paused, letting the tension build. "I noticed the long evenings you've been away, the distractions, the subtle distance. I've observed, and I've understood more than you think." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of realization crossing her face. She hadn't expected me to connect the dots. She assumed her sudden request would catch me off guard. But I had already seen the full picture. The room felt charged, not with anger, but with understanding. I continued, "I'm not angry. I'm attentive. I've been watching, waiting, and understanding. Actions reveal intentions, and intentions reveal truth." She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, aware now that her carefully constructed plan, her sudden pivot, had been transparent to someone who never stopped noticing. By the end of the evening, the air between us had changed. The playful vulnerability she had attempted was met with quiet awareness and subtle authority. She realized that words alone cannot conceal months of actions, and that every hidden motive eventually surfaces when someone is paying attention. The evening finally reached its turning point when Claire could no longer maintain the delicate balance of pretense. She looked at me, her eyes betraying a mixture of guilt and apprehension. "Nathan, I didn't expect you to notice," she whispered, almost as if saying it aloud would make the truth more bearable. I remained calm, letting my silence emphasize the weight of her admission. There was no need for anger, no need for raised voices. The truth had its own power, and it required only patience to reveal itself. "I noticed," I said quietly. "Every distance, every hesitation, every moment you turned away from me. It all told a story." My voice was steady, deliberate, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the table. I thought the timing was right. I wanted to see how you'd react," she confessed. Her sudden desire for a child, after months of rejection, was not merely a shift of heart. It was a test. A test she believed would catch me off guard. But she had underestimated my observation, my patience, and my awareness. I leaned back, maintaining calm authority. "Claire, desire cannot be measured in moments alone. Actions over months reveal intentions. Your sudden request shows more than words ever could." She looked down, the weight of understanding settling on her shoulders. She realized that her carefully constructed narrative had failed to hide the underlying truth, and that transparency cannot be forced. It emerges when someone is truly paying attention. A slow exhale escaped her lips. I didn't realize how obvious it was," she admitted softly. Her acknowledgement was the climax of the tension that had built over weeks, the point where concealment met awareness, and strategy met observation. I continued, "It's not about anger or blame, Claire. It's about understanding, honesty, and the realization that actions speak louder than words. When you assume someone won't see through you, you're inviting discovery. Patience and observation always reveal what is hidden." The room, once charged with silent tension, now carried a quiet resolution. She understood the consequences of underestimating me, and I had reinforced the subtle power of awareness. By the end of the night, the atmosphere had shifted. Claire no longer approached me with assumptions or playful tests. She understood that manipulation, even subtle, cannot escape observation. And I understood once more that control doesn't come from confrontation, but from calm attention, measured patience, and letting the truth unfold naturally. In that stillness, lessons were learned quietly, irreversibly.